Welcome, 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 good thinkers, to Good Thinking Live. Are you ready to have a good argument? That's the question. Jennifer says, ready to have a good argument. Fantastic, fantastic. I'm ready to have a good argument too. I'm ready to talk about how to expose bad arguments and how to think about arguments in general, because this is, again, Good Thinking Live, where good thinkers gather from around the world each week to talk not about what to think, but to work on improving how to think so we can think about our thinking. Metacognition, a little bit of a chance to think about our thinking. So we're going to get started on exposing bad arguments. And here's the question. Here is the first question. And then I'm going to welcome everyone on. Let us know who you are and where you're from. This is going to be a great show. All right, so here's the question. There are two ways to think about exposing bad arguments. Number one, exposing our own bad arguments. And number two, exposing others' bad arguments. So, which would you prefer to cover today? Would you prefer to cover exposing our own bad arguments, number one, or exposing others' bad arguments, number two? Let me know in the chat. Welcome, Jennifer, and welcome, Gopal. Let us know where you're from. We love having you. And we got this particular good thinking posted a little bit late, so we might be skinny on the live participation, but hopefully people will come on during and after the show to add their comments, because I think this is going to be a really important topic to be able to understand how to expose and then engage in kind of reframing how we think about arguments. So I'm going to say hi to Abdurrachid. Welcome, good thinker. Michael, welcome from Toronto. And Arvin, good call. Exposing our own bad arguments. Let me tell you, that is a rubber chicken worthy for one major reason. It is very, very uncomfortable to expose our own bad arguments. Therefore, we cloak them in an invisibility cloak. In other words, because it's so uncomfortable to expose our bad arguments, we kind of don't know how to look for them. Now, we can easily see how to see bad arguments in others. I see bad arguments all the time in others. It's only when I have to really be reflective of my own bad arguments, I make them, we all do, that I realize I need to work on that a little bit more. So we've got exposing our bad arguments. Michael says this and this. We've got Jennifer says, I'd like to learn from other people, but I'd like to learn about mine. Fair enough. Could you please talk slowly? Unable to understand. Yes, I will try. I'm so glad you said that. My natural tendency is to speak quickly because I want to always get all the points in and the conversation going in the 30 minutes we have. But you're right, I will be slower. So let me know if I'm doing a better job, Gopal. Thanks for reminding me. Joining from Houston, welcome, Lewis. All right, so let's get started. We know that when we are, emotions are high, or we have tied a belief really strongly with a tight bow to our identity, that it makes it very difficult to identify and expose our own bad arguments. We know this is true. So there's two things: high emotion, got to look out for when we're feeling emotion, high emotion, and also when something is so tethered to an argument is so tethered to our core belief and our self, what we know to be true, and particularly when it dangles close to that area of morality. However, and I'm going to welcome all these good thinkers who have recently joined the show today, but it is very important when we are trying to elevate critical thinking as a form of communication, which, by the way, is not appropriate for everything. It's not like it's the better of all forms of communication, except for one time or one consideration. When you are trying to get closer to the truth, not trying to land on the truth like a gymnastics vaulter who lands and now I have the truth. It's a 10-point. But when you're trying to get closer to the truth as a lifelong journey, then there is benefit to elevating critical thinking, even above persuasive communication, because that is how you determine what is reliable and what is relevant and what is valid so that you can constantly move closer to the truth. So Gopal says, from India, we've got LinkedIn Learning user from Vienna, Austria. Welcome. We've said Louise. Okay, so Brazil. Yay, welcome from Brazil. And we have got from South Africa. Welcome to good thinking. I love this because we have all of these good thinkers from all over, which gives us a very different perspective than if we're all working at the same company or coming from the same country or coming from the same organization where we all share kind of a worldview. This is great. This is what I love about this show. All right. So now that we know that today's conversation is really going to prioritize critical thinking because it is one of the most important, it's the foundational leg of the good thinking stool. Critical thinking, strategic thinking, and creative thinking form the good thinking stool. And that's why we're here. How do you think of critical thinking as different from other forms of communication? Let us know in the chat. All right. So let's talk about the challenge with critical thinking. The challenge is to engage in ways that encourage pleasant discourse, but not angry discord. And it's not easy, but it's doable. How many of you have had a chance to take our new LinkedIn Learning course called Critical Thinking for More Effective Communication? Anyone? Anyone? All right. So we are going to definitely, Adracha, this is a great conversation. What constitutes a bad argument? We're going to get into that because a bad argument is very difficult to see in the moment unless you've kind of prepared yourself ahead of time. So we're going to get into that. When we expose our bad arguments, we have to know that we've made a bad argument in a way. We have to protect ourselves, but not too preciously. So, when we realize we made a bad argument and the stakes are high for going back and saying, oh, that wasn't such a good argument, that prevents us from analyzing our bad arguments in the moment. But it shouldn't at least prevent us from analyzing our bad arguments afterwards. So because we're good thinkers, we're in pursuit of the truth, and our egos can take a lot if it's in pursuit of the truth. All right. So let's talk about two things that we have to know, and then we're going to get into six reminders. It's like 5 reminders and then a bonus, and then we're going to talk about exactly how to expose bad arguments that we make and that others would make in a way that moves the conversation along instead of stops it in its tracks. All right. So, and we're going to get into what a bad argument looks like, because there are bad arguments. When you provide evidence that has nothing to do with the argument, when you optimize persuasion ahead of presenting reliable, relevant evidence, and most importantly, when you engage in, or the other person engages in, fallacy or faulty reason, fallacies. And we're going to get into some key fallacies. We did an episode on fallacies. So if you want to go deeper into fallacies on another episode, let me know in the chat. Okay. So can bad arguments emerge from using intuition? Absolutely. Bad arguments can emerge because it's hard to make good ones. It's actually probably easier to use your intuition and make a bad argument. And here are the two things. We have to know what makes a bad argument so we don't think we're immune. So that's a very good question that Abdurraj had asked. Rubber chicken worthy. Rubber chicken worthy. And we have to expose our own bad arguments in ways that further the conversation and move us closer to the truth. All right. To figure out whether an argument is bad or good, I want to put these 5 little rules that I like to use. Exposing a bad argument is not the same as exposing a bad conclusion. For example, I can provide a lot of evidence. I can say that it's raining outside, which it is right now. I can say that where I am anyway, and I can provide a lot of irrelevant evidence or unreliable evidence. Like I could say, that the forecast is for rain. Now that might not be any kind of reliable evidence that it is raining right now. So that's just an example when you could have bad evidence or you could have a bad argument. And we're going to get into, like I said, a little bit of what those look like, but you could still have a good conclusion. So just because you have a good conclusion doesn't mean that the evidence you presented in your argument to support that conclusion is good. All right. Number two, so exposing a bad argument is not the same as exposing a bad conclusion. So first of all, they're different, but also exposing them is different. So you could, if you were talking to someone and you could say, I agree with this conclusion, but the evidence that you present is not relevant or reliable to that conclusion. Or I could see how you arrive at that conclusion, but you can't justify that conclusion by the evidence that you present. Same with myself. I could see how I might have a conclusion that I think is a very valid conclusion, but I have to look at the evidence that I'm presenting to make sure that the whole argument works. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so those are the first two. And then beware of dismissing disagreements as simply symptoms of stupidity or weakness of your opponent. Now, in an argument, it is easy to assume intent, to assume the person's just stupid, or that they're just evil, or they're just insert label. And the thing about it is that we don't always know what the intent is. And we don't know necessarily that the person doesn't have access to information that we don't have. So it's very easy to dismiss someone as being wicked or stupid. Beware of that, because those things can hide the ingredients, or those assumptions rather can hide the ability to see when you might not be making a good argument. And here's something else. Smart people can make bad arguments. Smart people can make bad arguments. Making good arguments is really a skill that has to be learned, and it's different than persuasive arguments. So if you took high school debate, you might be incredible at making great persuasive arguments. But that doesn't necessarily mean from a critical thinking standpoint that they're good arguments. And that's why we sometimes think that shouting people down or providing just a deluge of just random evidence actually can create a good argument. It can create a persuasive argument, but it's not necessarily a good argument. All right. So we've got smart people can make bad arguments. Guess what else? Bad people can make good arguments. And this gets to one of the very tricky and common bad argument fallacies, which is called the Ad Hominem Fallacy, where you criticize the person and not the argument. And we're going to get into some questions about who can make arguments. How do labels affect whether we accept an argument as good or bad? And how can that lead us astray in the true sense of moving closer to the truth? Okay, so bad people can make good arguments. And Abdurrahman says the Ad Hominem Fallacy. Exactly. That is where we criticize the person instead of the argument. Well, you're just a such and such person, even though the argument might be a very good argument. All right, so that's one of the most common fallacies, and you see it all the time. I'm going to take the banner off so we have more room for our comments. Okay, next, and this is the bonus. We should work to be able to scrutinize ideas separate from whatever human the idea clings to. Ideas are out there. Ideas are out there. They are, in some ways, who knows how they manifest. Ideas manifest on the quantum level, right? But ideas are out there. And whether they cling to, if a bad idea clings to me, we should be able to scrutinize the bad idea or the idea separate from the person who presents the idea. So if you don't like me, or I don't look like someone who should have access to certain opinions, you should be, or even you think that you want to protect me, but I'm in possession of, or I have bad ideas that cling to me, we should be able to, no idea should be above scrutiny, and no person should be beneath dignity. So we should be able to separate the person from the idea. All right. So those are the kind of the key things to think about as we get into how to expose bad ideas. What about labels? How many of you use labels? What label? Okay, here's a good one. What label would you use to describe yourself? I'm sure you have several, but when you think about yourself, what's the label that you would like people to use to describe you? Or a label, not the label, but a label. Share it in the chat. Extra bonus point chickens for anyone who anyone who is willing to share a label or two that they would like to have used for them. All right. Please go back to the normal speed of talk. I love that. You cannot fulfill all of their arguments. The next one you can take off. You can take off your glasses. Yeah, I'm going to just talk how I'm going to talk, but I appreciate the feedback, and the glasses I need to see. So it's not an option. Anyway, all right. Detail oriented. So Louis says detail oriented. That's a label. Excellent. Resilient. Another label. Who has another label? Who has another? Faithful. Aha. I love these labels. Okay. Fair and logical. Excellent. Keep the labels coming. We're going to pull all the labels in. Rubber chickens for everyone who shares their labels. I don't see any labels. I see all kind of trait labels, which I kind of like, and not identity labels. I'm not seeing anyone share an identity label. It's interesting. So here are some questions. You ready? Okay. Can a rich person make a good argument about people with fewer resources? Can a rich person make a good argument about poor people or about policies? Can a rich person make a good argument about poor people or things that affect poor people? Yes or no? Yes or no? I'm going to ask a bunch of these in succession. Ooh, Jennifer says, oh, we've got, what's a rubber chicken? Rubber chicken, for those of you, who wants to explain what a rubber chicken is? Which good, regular good thinker wants to explain to a new good thinker what a rubber chicken is? It's just a silly thing that we do. Rubber chickens are earned by participation, whatever. They're just for fun. All right. Jennifer says emotional. We've got forthcoming. Aha. So Louis says, I like this. Yes. And Rudy says an informed rich person can. So what makes an informed rich person? So now we've kind of got agreement that a rich person can make a good argument about poor people if they have enough background and evidence, Michael says. Excellent. Excellent. All right. What about, can a woman make a good argument about something that mostly relates to or affects men? Can a woman make an argument about something that mostly affects men? Ha. Jennifer says, I love it. Jennifer says, in case you want to know what a rubber chicken, when you're a good thinker, you get a rubber chicken. Even when you're a good thinker, sometimes I forget, but yes. All right. Can a woman make an argument, a good argument about something that relates almost exclusively or affects men? What about the opposite? Can a man make a good argument about something that only affects women? What do you think? Come on now. Let's see how powerful these labels are. Let's get your comments. I want to know what you think. All right. Can old employees make good arguments about things that mostly affect or impact younger employees? Okay, so Michael says same response. How can a man be massively informed about things that only affect women? Can they? Yes, they can, Jennifer says. Louis says, yes, they can. And we've got, yes, to reverse it, a man can make a good argument to women's issues such as abortion rights. All right. Ooh, good. Someone stepped into controversy. Good, Rudy. What about, can women make good arguments about things that only affect men? If you do your homework, you can defend any position. So how much do you have to experience or share the same viewpoint or perspective? Or at some point, does a certain label exclude you from the conversation? Aha, by talking to women. So what if you only talk to some women? Not representative women, not women who are well versed on the issue at hand. Do you have to be a woman to be able to offer advice to men about issues that are most important to women? Can you be an uninformed woman about issues that affect women? I mean, I could think of a lot of things that I should probably be more informed about, women's health, for example, and how that might differ. Or if you want to be a little more cognizant of gender communication, you could say female health, whatever the terminology is that you're comfortable with. Does being a woman give me insight into making a good argument? I assume the mindset of men and women is still vague for both. Absolutely. Or maybe women or men in some ways, have access to different information on a, on a cellular level. Who knows? So Michael says, you have to understand the other side as well. First seek to understand, then be understood. Jennifer says, closed-minded and just making rash opinions can make you unqualified. Absolutely. These are excellent, 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 excellent. So what do you think about this? In my course, in the newest course, Critical Thinking for More Effective Communication, I tell the story of Hector. So Hector just left a large company and he started a new startup, a small startup. And some of his colleagues were wondering about his competency with launching a new business. Now, what if his colleagues say, Hector does not understand entrepreneurship because he's a large company guy? Is that a good argument? Is it a good argument? What do you think? Do you think the Hector argument is a good argument? Let me know in the chat. Rudy says, you can be uninformed on women's issues and challenges. You can be insulated. Absolutely. And you can even be that if you're a man or a woman, right? Absolutely. Same with men. You could be clueless about how, the latest in men's health and understanding, because maybe, you're not reading those articles, or that's not your area of expertise, or reading about a scientific study. You think you're informing yourself, but you really don't even know how to decipher whether a scientific study is a good one or not, because that's not your area of expertise. Maybe you're running another company and that's not, so there's all kinds of things. Jennifer says, not necessarily. Okay. So do you think that's a good argument? Hector doesn't understand entrepreneurship because he's a large company guy. I'm going to give Jennifer a rubber chicken. Not necessarily a good argument. What would be a better argument? What would be a better argument? Anyone want to take another stab at an argument? The most common bad argument, red flags, are these fallacies. And we've talked about them. We've talked about the ad hominem fallacy. Another common fallacy that makes a bad argument that I think is good to be aware of is the straw man fallacy. When we take an argument and we distort, so someone makes an argument and then we distort the version of what they said and then offer that as the evidence to knock down their claim. So we take the weakest of all their claims. So they make all these claims. Some are good, some are bad. Some evidence is good, some evidence is bad. But rather than attacking the strong man, the steel man, we attack the weak man. And so we take a straw man. So basically we take one little thing and we distort, or we take their weakest argument and we argue against that. So the key here is always look at the strongest argument your opponent, I wish there was a better word for opponent. Always look at the strongest argument that your opponent is using to defend their claim, not the weakest. That's hard, but practice that. And by doing that, we tend to eliminate some of the weak arguments from the weak links in our own arguments. You can think about that. Like, someone might give you 5 different reasons that they support gun control, or they support abortion rights, or any of these kinds of things. And maybe 3 of the reasons are really good, 2 are weak, and you're going to argue against them. So you take the weak ones and argue against those. That's evidence of making a bad argument, because that's a form of a straw man fallacy. All right. So straw man arguments is prevalent in political issues. Absolutely. And when we are strong and when our beliefs are tied strongly to whatever political philosophy is out there, it's easy to see these straw man arguments in others, in our opponents, but it's not as easy to see them in our own. And that's where good thinkers go to look. They start with their own biases before they start looking at, where's Waldo with other people's biases. So Hector has not done any research on starting a new company. That's a better argument. Or maybe a better argument would be a question. And we're going to get into when you can use questions as opposed to answers in the last few minutes of this. So that's a really good one. All right, we'll save more of the fallacies for another discussion, because I think if you go back and you can find older versions of, if you subscribe on YouTube to Becky Saltzman, we don't do anything fancy with the videos. We just let them go onto YouTube. But if you subscribe, you can go back, first of all, get notifications, and then you can also go back and look at older episodes, and then you can make suggestions for what we want to do in the future. All right, here, how do we expose our opponent's arguments in a way that encourages critical thinking, communication, instead of unproductive discord? Number 1, to avoid accidental fallacies, start by highlighting common ground. And this means actually list points of agreement. So in the very beginning, if you were listening, or even if you know you're going to embark, if you know you're going to be in an argument, whether it's over the holidays or, in a work setting, take the time. If you're going to make an argument, if you're going to be in the argument arena, you need to earn the right by doing the work. Don't just jump into the argument arena because you watched a YouTube video or because this is what you believe, so tied to your belief. If you're going to step into that argument arena, you got to earn the right to step in. So take the time to find common ground and then list any potential points of agreement. And then if your opponent has made their case, attempt to restate your opponent's claims clearly. And you could say something like, let me make sure I understand your position. And then say, will you promise to tell me if I get any part of it wrong? Will you promise to tell me if I get any part of it wrong? So have you ever expressed your opinion? Tell me if any of you have experienced this. You have expressed your opinion, your opponent's opinion so clearly, like you did this, like you stated common ground and you said, let me understand your position. And you've restated it in such a fair way that they literally said, thanks, I wish I had thought of putting it that way. That's my goal. I have never had someone that I've been arguing against actually state something, then I've restated it and had them say, wow, you have restated my argument, one that you don't even agree with, or you're not even in support of yet. You've actually stated my argument better than I've made it myself. That would be my goal. Never achieved it yet. Have any of you achieved that? If you have, you get all the rubber chickens. All right. So Abdurrachid said, ooh, by using the RRV method. Now, this is really good because the RRV method is really identifying, is it reliable? Is it relevant? And is it valid? So Arvin said, never done that. Me neither. Me neither. I've never achieved that. But it would be really cool. Like that would be my goal. Can I state it so elegantly and so fairly, just being fair to the argument that they were pleased. They thought I made their argument better than them. Because if you're going to really step into the argument arena, you need to know your opponent's argument as well, how to make it as well, if not better than you know how to make your own. So Jennifer says, I'm sure you've achieved that. I haven't. No one's ever said that. That's my goal. All right. But thank you. Number 3, identify what you've learned from your opponent. You could say, I have never really thought about it from that perspective, or that piece of evidence is really an interesting. Now, saying what you've learned from your opponent doesn't mean you've acquiesced and that you agree with them. But if you mention anything that you've learned, and I wish there was a better word for opponent, your target, when you're talking about making an argument and your goal, if your mutual goal is moving closer to the truth in a constant pursuit, a forever journey. What do you call the person that you're arguing against? An opponent? I don't really like that, but that's all I can think of. If you have a better word for it, let me know. All right. Also, don't call out fallacies you spot the answer on a quiz show. Sometimes, I'm tempted to say, yeah, that's a straw man. And if you're going to do that, you might want to take it back and make it about yourself. I don't want to make a straw man argument by arguing against your weakest point, which is this, this, and this. So I'm going to take your strongest point and argue against that. So you could do it that way, but just calling out fallacies like you're spotting something in a game show is not really an effective way of moving the conversation forward. And also remember that you don't know for sure whether your opponent purposely distorts your argument. Maybe they just didn't understand it properly. So if you do see someone, your opponent, your target, making your argument or making some assumptions or infusing your argument with bad points, it may not be that they're just being a fallacious thinker. Like they may not be just throwing out fallacy. You might not have made your argument that well. So you got to look at your own skills. Check your own argument and practice restating the outlines of your argument and ask your opponent to summarize your argument. So this is a really good thing. So if you ask your opponent, how would you summarize my argument? You made this argument, maybe you're something very much you care about, something highly charged. And you say, how would you summarize my argument? And if they summarize it with a lot of fallacy, you could ask questions like, really, I must not have made my argument very well. How would how could I restate it to make it better? But if they get your arguments and reasons right, you know that you're arguing in a fair arena. But if they continue to misinterpret your argument after you restate it, then you have to acknowledge it's not the time for critical thinking communication. And that's the thing. Like, I've had some people say, well, what if people aren't listening to me? Should I just, be more aggressive or more persuasive? You can acknowledge that this is not the time for critical thinking communication. Maybe this is the time to engage in debate. Now, have you ever said, I could be wrong, but, and then you go on to state something? I could be wrong, but, and then you go on to state something. This is where, if you ever use the term, I could be wrong, but, follow it up with a clarifying question, not a persuasive argument. I could be wrong, but now ask the question. And that's one of the things I always try to do, is kind of make sure that I'm getting clarification. Again, a good argument is deliberately constructed from a solid foundation. And debates are different. We can get into the whole difference between debating and arguing for critical thinking and for persuasion, because they're two different skill sets, and they're related for sure, but they're not the same. And I'm going to just end it with a couple of key ideas that I think are really great since we're going long. So Abdurraj has said discussion partner. We can call each other the companion or truth seeker. And I love all these, but sometimes when you're in the moment, it's just like, it's hard to come up with all these, your truth seeker. Like, no, we're just arguing. So I don't know. Is it the opponent? While calling out fallacies in this discussion is a good idea, I do try to label fallacies when viewing videos or reading articles. I love that. Oh, I love that. I love that. It is all on how well you present your evidence. Make it convincing and how it relates to the argument. Absolutely. And if you can make a good argument persuasive, better still. Here are the key ideas that we're going to end with. Well, number one, think about the difference between being in the argument and constructing the argument. Okay? So just separate being in the argument from constructing the argument. And if you're going to take on things that you really think are important arguments, you got to do the work to construct them. In the moment, bringing out random evidence, whatever. So that's number one. Don't match energy, set energy. Just because someone's getting heightened or quiet or sad or whatever, you don't need to match the energy. You can set the energy. Don't raise your voice. Improve your points. That's a big one. If you find yourself raising your points, turn it down and work on crisping up your message. All right. Okay. So then don't show up to every argument you're invited to. If you're invited to an argument and you feel that it's not the time for a critical thinking argument where you're advancing the truth, you're just trying to, you're in a debate, you're not in the mood to be in a debate, you don't have to show up to every argument, and you don't have to let them think that they've won if you don't show up. You could just say, this is an argument that I would prioritize critical thinking and the advancement of the truth, and this isn't the right time for it, but I'd love to have it at another time. So you can always do that. Then you can go back and prepare really quickly so you've got your good argument constructed. So the other thing is, I'm not sure I really like this silence is violence. I mean, it rhymes, and in some contexts, you should be paying attention to the bad things happening in the world and not just ignoring them, and that's for sure. But silence is also golden. So allow silence. Now, that's something I constantly have to work at. I'm not very good at it, but I'm trying. And the rate at which you learn and progress in the world depends on how willing you are to weigh the merits of new ideas, even if you don't instinctively like them. And perhaps especially if you don't like them. But that's the pursuit of good thinking. So I want to thank you all for being here. Next week, I want to tell you, I'm super, super excited. We're going to be talking about the metaverse and how to think about the future in a way where it might not land in this incremental way where we think that society is going to change slowly but surely, but maybe, just a massive upheaval of opportunity, but also discomfort. So we're going to talk about the metaverse and how that may change so many things that we hold as vital truths. And so we're going to have our first conversation next Monday. So I hope you all join. Have a great week. Thank you, good thinkers. Sorry if I missed any of your messages. I'll try to get them after the show. Have a great week.